The howling hall of Thornhaven had never witnessed a silence this suffocating. Anwen pressed her spine against the cold marble pillar, her fingernails carving crescents into her palms as she watched the ceremony unfold below. 1,000 wolves filled the great chamber, their breath forming clouds in the winter air, their eyes fixed upon the raised platform where the Alpha King stood in ceremonial black and crimson. The claiming. She should not have come. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, to return to the servants' quarters where she had spent the last 3 days pacing, waiting, and praying for the message Kagor had promised to send. No message had come, and so she had crept through the shadows to see for herself what her silence had purchased. Kagor Ironclaw stood motionless on the dais, his shoulders rigid beneath the weight of his ceremonial furs. Even from this distance, Anwen could trace the familiar lines of his jaw, the dark hair that fell across his brow, the powerful stance that made every wolf in the realm bow their heads in submission. For 8 months, she had known a different man. The man who had found her crying in the eastern gardens after the other servants had mocked her unknown parentage. The man who had returned night after night, speaking to her of loneliness and duty, and the crushing weight of a crown he had never wanted. The man whose hands had trembled the first time he touched her face, as though she were something sacred. When the political obligations are satisfied, he had whispered against her hair just last week, I will announce you before the entire pack. You will stand beside me, Anwen, my queen, my mate. Nothing in this world or any other will change that. She had believed every word. Her hand drifted to her hip, where his claiming bite lay hidden beneath her dress. The mark he had given her 3 months ago, in the moonlit clearing where he had pressed his teeth to her flesh and sworn she was the only woman who would ever bear his claim. The mark that now burned like a brand against her skin. The candidates will approach, the High Chronicler announced, his voice echoing through the hushed chamber. Anwen stopped breathing. 5 women ascended the dais steps, each draped in ceremonial white, each representing a powerful bloodline that could strengthen the Alpha King's reign. They moved like silk and shadow, every gesture calculated, every smile practiced. And at their center walked Sariel Grimwood, daughter of Lord Hadrian Grimwood, heiress to the Eastern Territories, a woman whose beauty was matched only by the ruthless ambition of her family. Her silver blonde hair cascaded down her back like frozen starlight. Her eyes, pale and calculating, swept across the crowd with the satisfaction of someone who already knew the outcome. The wolves murmured their approval. The Grimwoods commanded 3,000 warriors and controlled the mountain passes that connected Thornhaven to the eastern trade routes. This match would make the Alpha King's power absolute. Anwen searched Kagor's face for any sign of the man she loved. She found nothing. His features were carved from granite. His amber eyes, which had blazed with warmth when they looked upon her, stared straight ahead with an emptiness that made her stomach clench. Kagor Ironclaw, Alpha King of Thornhaven, blood of the first wolves, the High Chronicler intoned. You have heard the counsel of your advisors. You have reviewed the alliances and treaties. The pack awaits your choice. Silence stretched through the hall like a held breath. Anwen's mark seared against her hip. Surely he could feel it. Surely any moment now he would turn and find her in the crowd. Surely he would speak her name and declare that his choice had already been made in secret clearings under winter moons. Kagor stepped forward. His movement was wrong. Anwen realized it instantly. The fluid grace she knew, the predatory elegance that had drawn her to him from the first moment, was absent. He moved like a puppet, mechanical and hollow, and his eyes, those amber eyes that had burned with passion when he spoke of their future, were flat, distant, empty. I choose. His voice rang out, hollow as a tomb, Sariel of House Grimwood. The hall erupted. Howls of celebration shook the ancient stones. Warriors stamped their feet. Lords embraced. The political alliance that would secure Thornhaven's dominance for generations had been achieved. But Kagor was not finished. He turned to Serial, took her hand, and pulled her toward him. Then he kissed her. Not a ceremonial brush of lips, not a formal gesture of acceptance. He kissed her deeply, thoroughly, publicly, claiming her before the eyes of every wolf in the kingdom, while the mark on Anwen's hip felt like it was being torn from her body with burning claws. A sound escaped Anwen's throat. Not quite a scream, not quite a sob. Something between raw and animal, and completely involuntary. She doubled over in the shadows, one hand flying to her hip, the other wrapping protectively around her belly, where a secret even greater than his claiming bite had taken root. She was 8 weeks along. She had planned to tell him tonight, after the ceremony, when he came to her as he always did. She had practiced the words 100 times, imagining the joy that would break across his face. Now those words would never be spoken. Through tear-blurred vision, she watched Kagor release Sariel from the kiss. Watched Lord Hadrian Grimwood step forward to clasp the Alpha King's hand. Watched Sariel smile with triumph, her pale eyes scanning the crowd with possessive satisfaction. He did not look for Anwen. He did not hesitate. He did not seem to remember she existed. A sob tore free, lost in the cacophony of celebration. Anwen stumbled backward, desperate to flee before the grief crushed her completely. The doors of the howling hall exploded inward. Every wolf spun toward the entrance. Guards drew weapons. The celebration dissolved into chaos and snarling confusion. Through the shattered doors walked a figure that made the breath freeze in Anwen's lungs. He was tall, impossibly tall, with hair the color of starlight and midnight woven together. His features were too beautiful to be real, too sharp to be mortal. Cheekbones that could cut glass, eyes like molten silver, skin that seemed to glow with its own inner luminescence. Fae. The Fae King himself had come to Thornhaven. Behind him walked a retinue of his kind, each one achingly beautiful, and each one radiating a power that made the wolves instinctively shrink back. They moved like water, like wind, like forces of nature given form. Lysander Nightwhisper, the High Chronicler gasped. King of the Eventide Court, you were not invited to these proceedings. I do not require an invitation. The Fae King's voice was music and thunder, gentle and devastating. I require only what is mine. His silver eyes swept across the gathered wolves. They found Anwen. The world stopped. Something inside her chest cracked open. A sensation she had never felt before. Not with Kagor, not with anyone, flooded through her veins. It was warmth and lightning, and the feeling of coming home after 1,000 years of wandering. The Fae King's perfect features shifted. His eyes widened, his lips parted. And then he moved. He crossed the hall in strides that seemed to bend the very air around him, wolves parting before his presence like wheat before a scythe. He passed the dais where Kagor stood frozen. He ignored the snarling guards who raised their weapons. He stopped before the pillar where Anwen hid, and he knelt. The Fae King of the Eventide Court, the most powerful immortal in 3 realms, knelt before a servant girl in a threadbare dress, tears streaming down cheeks she had not realized were wet. I have searched for you, he breathed, his musical voice cracking with emotion, for 400 years. Behind him, she heard Kagor's roar of fury, heard guards shouting, weapons being drawn, and chaos erupting across the hall. But she could not look away from those silver eyes. I don't understand, she whispered. I'm no one. I'm nothing. You are everything. He reached up, his fingers hovering beside her face, not quite touching. You are the other half of my soul. You are the mate the stars promised me before your grandmother's grandmother drew breath. She belongs to me, Kagor snarled, suddenly beside them, his hand closing around Anwen's arm. She bears my claiming bite. She is pack property. Lysander rose to his full height. He was taller than Kagor, broader, and when his eyes met the Alpha King's, they held a cold fury that made the wolves nearby whimper and avert their gazes. "Your claiming bite is an abomination," the Fey King said softly. "A forced bond placed upon Fey blood without consent or knowledge. It is invalid under the laws of every realm." "Fey blood?" Kagor's grip tightened on Anwen's arm. "She is a servant, an orphan. She has no blood worth speaking of." Lysander's smile was winter itself. "She is the daughter of Celestine Nightwhisper, a distant kinswoman of my house, a princess of the Eventide court who fled your brutal pack 23 years ago to protect her unborn child from wolves who would have slaughtered her for the crime of existing." The hall went silent. Anwen felt her legs give way. Only Kagor's bruising grip kept her upright. Princess. Fey. Daughter of royalty. Everything she had ever believed about herself was crumbling. "Lies," Kagor spat. "Fey tricks." "Then explain," Lysander said calmly, "why my mark appeared on her skin the moment I entered this hall." Anwen's free hand flew to her collarbone. Where there had been nothing before, she felt something new. A tingling warmth spreading beneath her fingers. She looked down and saw silver light bleeding through the fabric of her dress, forming intricate patterns across her chest. A Fey claiming mark. She had not felt it form, had not consented to it, but there it was, glowing with soft radiance, answering to Lysander's presence like a flower turning toward the sun. And beside it, Kagor's wolf bite burned with agonizing heat. 2 marks, 2 claims, one chosen through manipulation, one formed through destiny. "She carries my child," Kagor snarled. "Whatever Fey blood runs in her veins, my heir grows in her belly. She will remain in Thornhaven." Lysander's expression flickered. He looked at Anwen, at the way her hand had moved unconsciously to her stomach, and she saw something pass through those silver eyes: pain, acceptance, and beneath it all, a love so vast it took her breath away. "Then she will make her own choice," the Fey King said quietly, "as is her right." Every eye in the hall turned to Anwen, the servant girl with no name, the carrying mother with no mate, the lost princess who had never known what she truly was. Kagor's hand tightened on her arm. "You are mine. You swore yourself to me. You let me claim you. I let you claim me because I loved you." Her voice came out stronger than she expected. "Because you promised me I would be your queen. Because you said nothing would change what we had." She looked at Sariel, whose lips were still swollen from his kiss. "And then you chose another before I could even tell you about our child." Kagor's face twisted. For one moment, just one, she saw something flicker in those empty amber eyes. Confusion, horror, as if he were waking from a dream and finding himself in a nightmare. "Anwen, I don't remember." "Enough." Lord Hadrian Grimwood stepped forward, his cold eyes fixed on Anwen with undisguised hatred. "This servant girl has clearly conspired with the Fae to disrupt our alliance. She should be executed for treason." Several wolves moved toward her. Lysander raised one hand. Every wolf in the hall froze in place. Not by choice. Their bodies simply stopped responding. Eyes darted in terror, but not a single muscle moved. "Touch her," the Fae King said softly, "and I will reduce this castle to ash before your hearts beat again." He turned to Anwen, and his expression softened. "You do not have to choose tonight. You do not have to choose at all. But I am offering you sanctuary in my realm, where no wolf can reach you, where no Grimwood assassin can find you, where you can safely deliver your child and discover who you truly are." He extended his hand, palm up, waiting. "Come with me," he said. "Not as my mate, not as my obligation, simply as a woman who deserves to know the truth about herself before making any choice that will shape her eternity." Anwen looked at his hand, then at Kagor, still frozen, his amber eyes screaming words his mouth could not form. Then at Lord Grimwood, whose hatred promised death if she stayed. Then at Serial, whose pale eyes held nothing but contempt for the servant who had dared to touch what was now hers. The choice was not a choice at all. Anwen placed her hand in Lysander's. The silver mark on her chest blazed with light. The wolf bite on her hip shrieked with burning agony, and the baby in her womb kicked sharply, as if reaching toward the Fey King's warmth. "I will come with you," she whispered, "but I make no promises beyond tonight. I ask for nothing more." The Fey King's hand closed around hers, gentle as moonlight, and then the world dissolved into silver mist, and she was falling, falling, falling through space and starlight until the howling hall of Thornhaven vanished entirely. The last thing she heard was Kagor's roar of anguish as Lysander's magic released its hold. A sound of loss so profound it made even her wounded heart crack further. But she did not look back. She could not afford to. 2 months had passed since the world Anwen knew dissolved into silver mist. The cottage at the edge of the Whispering Glen had become her sanctuary. Nestled between ancient oaks whose leaves shimmered with perpetual twilight, it was a place outside of time, outside of politics, outside of everything that had shattered her heart in the Howling Hall. The Eventide Court had offered her chambers in the Crystal Palace. Lysander himself had promised her an entire wing, servants, protection, anything she desired. Anwen had refused it all. She needed distance. From the wolves who had betrayed her. From the Fae who claimed her. From everyone who wanted something from her that she was not ready to give. And so Lysander had granted her this cottage instead, with wards so powerful that no creature could find her unless she wished to be found. Now she stood in the small garden behind the cottage, her hands caked with soil, her belly swelling visibly beneath her simple dress. The child grew quickly, faster than any human pregnancy, the Fey healers had warned her. Wolf blood and Fey blood mingled in her womb, creating something that had not existed in living memory. "You are strong," she murmured, pressing her palm to the curve where the baby kicked. "Stronger than either of your bloodlines, stronger than me." The kicks came from 2 places at once. Anwen had noticed it a week ago and had tried to ignore the implication. But the Fey midwife who visited every 3 days had confirmed her suspicions just yesterday. Twins. She was carrying twins, and she was utterly alone. A familiar ache bloomed in her chest. She thought of Kagor, not the hollow puppet who had kissed Serial before the entire pack, but the man who had held her in moonlit clearings and promised her forever. Where was he now? Did he think of her at all? Did he even remember what they had shared? Or had whatever dark magic erased his love, erased his memories too? And Lysander. The Fey King had kept his word. He had not pressed her. Had not demanded she accept his claim. He visited once a week. Always announced. Always respectful. Always carrying gifts he left at her doorstep without asking for anything in return. Books she had mentioned wanting to read. Seeds for flowers that bloomed in perpetual twilight. A blanket woven from moonbeams for the babies when they came. He never asked to enter her cottage. Never touched her beyond the brush of fingers when she accepted his offerings. Never spoke of the mate bond that she knew must be tormenting him as much as his cousin's wolf bite had tormented her. The wolf bite. Anwen's hand moved to her hip, where Kagor's mark still burned beneath her dress. It should have faded by now. When a claiming bond was rejected, truly rejected, the mark disappeared within weeks. She had heard stories of abandoned mates whose scars simply vanished, leaving smooth skin and bitter memories. But her mark had not faded. If anything, it had darkened, the scar tissue deepening to an angry crimson that pulsed with heat every time the wind blew from the direction of Thornhaven. And sometimes, late at night, she felt something through it. A presence, vast and desperate, pushing against the edges of her consciousness. A searching, a howling, a grief so profound it made her weep without understanding why. She pushed the feeling away every time. Kagor had made his choice. Whatever he felt now was not her concern. The silver mark on her collarbone, by contrast, had only grown more beautiful. The intricate patterns had spread across her chest like frost on a windowpane, delicate whorls and spirals that glowed softly whenever Lysander was near. It did not burn. It did not ache. It felt like warmth on a winter morning, like the first breath after drowning, like home. But Anwen did not trust it. She had trusted Kagor's promises, and look where that had led her. Pregnant, alone, hiding in a magical cottage while two kingdoms tore themselves apart searching for her. A sharp knock echoed through the cottage. Anwen's heart seized. She rose from the garden soil, wiping her hands on her apron, reaching instinctively for the iron poker she kept by the hearth. "My lady?" A female voice, melodic and familiar. "It is Mavis. The king sends news." Anwen relaxed slightly. Mavis was her appointed contact with the eventide court, a fey woman with hair like autumn leaves and eyes that held 3 centuries of kindness. She had become something approaching a friend over the past 2 months. She opened the cottage door. Mavis's face was pale, her usual serene composure cracked with something that looked disturbingly like fear. "What has happened?" Anwen demanded. "May I enter? The wards will not let me speak of certain things while standing on the threshold." Anwen stepped aside, her grip tightening on the poker. Mavis moved to the center of the small room, her autumn leaf hair catching the firelight. "I bring news from Thornhaven, from the Wolf Kingdom." The name sent ice through Anwen's veins. "What news?" "The Alpha King has gone mad." The words hung in the air, sharp as broken glass. "Mad?" Anwen heard herself whisper. Mavis nodded, her expression grim. 3 days after you vanished from the Howling Hall, he woke screaming your name. He tore apart his own chambers with his bare hands. He threw Serial Grimwood from the royal wing and confined her family pending investigation. Anwen's knees weakened. She lowered herself into the nearest chair. Since then, he has not slept, has barely eaten. His wolf has been fighting for control, driving him into shifts that last for days at a time. He has deployed every warrior in his kingdom to search for you, offering rewards so vast they have emptied the royal treasury. He chose her, Anwen said hollowly. I watched him choose her. I watched him kiss her. He remembers none of it. Mavis's voice softened. Our spies in Thornhaven have pieced together what happened. The night before the claiming, Lord Grimwood's servants delivered wine to the king's chambers, wine laced with a compound derived from night-blooming hemlock and wolf's bane. Anwen's breath caught. The combination did not merely suppress his wolf. It severed his connection to his own mind. For 3 days, he was a puppet, speaking words he did not choose, performing actions he did not control. Mavis paused, including the rejection, including the kiss. No. The word came out strangled. No, I saw his eyes. They were empty, cold. He did not recognize me. Because there was no him to recognize you. The Kagor you loved was locked somewhere deep inside, unable to break through the poison's hold. He woke 3 days later with no memory of the ceremony, no memory of choosing Serial, and his mate Bond screaming that you had vanished. Anwen's hand flew to her hip, where the wolf bite burned with sudden, searing heat. He feels that, Mavis said quietly. Every time your mark burns, he feels an answering fire. It is the only thing keeping him from going completely feral. The babies kicked violently, movements coming from 2 opposite directions at once. There is more. Mavis's expression darkened further. The Grimwoods have not accepted their downfall quietly. When Kagor confined Serial and began investigating her family's treachery, Lord Hadrian fled into the eastern mountains with 300 loyal warriors. He escaped? He did more than escape. Mavis withdrew a folded paper from her sleeve. This message was intercepted by our scouts 2 days ago. Anwen took the paper with numb fingers. The seal was broken, but she could see the Grimwood crest pressed into the dark wax, a serpent coiled around a crescent moon. The message inside was brief. The half-breed carries the Alpha's heirs. She must be eliminated before the birth. Send the Night Fangs. Payment upon confirmation of death. Long live Queen Sariel. The paper fell from Anwen's hands. Assassins, she breathed. The Night Fangs are the most deadly killers the wolf clans have ever produced. They have never failed to eliminate a target. Mavis's voice was tight with urgency. My lady, the wards around this cottage are powerful, but they were designed to hide you, not to withstand a direct assault. If the Night Fangs have been deployed... A howl split the evening air. Both women froze. Through the cottage window, Anwen saw shapes emerging from the tree line. Not the silver-furred wolves of Lysander's Fey Guard. These were darker, larger, their movements coordinated with predatory precision. And their eyes, even from this distance, burned with amber hunger. They have found you, Mavis whispered. The wolf bite on Anwen's hip exploded with agony. She gasped, doubling over as pain radiated through her body. This was nothing like the dull burn she had grown accustomed to. This was searing, overwhelming, as if molten iron had been pressed against her flesh. And beneath the pain, she felt him, Kagor. His presence crashed against the edges of her consciousness like a hurricane against a cliff, not searching this time, not howling with grief. This was something sharper, more immediate. Warning. He was trying to warn her. We must go, Mavis said, grabbing Anwen's arm. The king has emergency wards that will transport us to the palace if I... The cottage door splintered inward. A wolf the size of a small horse lunged through the opening, jaws wide, eyes blazing with murderous intent. Mavis threw herself between it and Anwen, her hands igniting with fey fire. The wolf's teeth found her throat before the flames could form. Mavis! Anwen screamed as her friend's body crumpled, blood spraying across the cottage floor. The wolf shook its massive head, tearing, destroying, and then turned those burning amber eyes toward Anwen. Target acquired. The thought came not from her own mind, but from the creature before her. The Night Fangs could communicate telepathically with their prey, a final terror before the kill. The half-breed dies tonight. Her mongrel offspring dies with her. Anwen's back hit the cottage wall. Her hand found the iron poker, but she knew it was useless. Knew that one pregnant woman with a fireplace tool could not stop even a single Night Fang, let alone the pack that was even now surrounding her sanctuary. The wolf gathered itself to spring. Anwen closed her eyes, her arms wrapping protectively around her belly. I'm sorry, she thought to the twins she would never meet. I'm so sorry. Light erupted through the cottage. Not golden, not amber, silver. Pure, blazing silver that made the Night Fang howl in agony and stumble backward, its dark fur smoking where the light touched it. Anwen's eyes flew open. The light was coming from her, from the silver mark on her collarbone, which blazed like a captured star. From her hands, which crackled with energy she had never known she possessed. From her very skin, which glowed with the luminescence of moonlight given form. No, she whispered, staring at her own radiant palms. But her body did not listen. The power surged outward, a wave of silver fire that slammed into the Night Fang and hurled it through the ruined cottage door. More wolves were waiting outside. She could hear them snarling, see their shadows through the windows, but they recoiled from the light that now poured from her in endless, devastating waves. The babies kicked wildly, both of them, as if adding their own strength to hers. And through the bond she had tried so hard to ignore, Anwen felt something else. Lysander. He was coming, tearing through dimensions to reach her, His presence blazed against her consciousness like a second sun, and when she instinctively reached for him through the silver mark, he answered with 3 words that shook her to her soul. "Hold on, beloved, I am coming." Anwen screamed as the power overwhelmed her, as the cottage walls began to crack and the night fangs began to flee, as everything she thought she knew about herself shattered into a million blazing pieces. The last thing she saw before the silver light consumed her entirely was a figure emerging from the tree line. Not a wolf. Not a fae. A man with midnight hair and amber eyes that burned with desperate, agonized love. Kagor had found her too. And he was too late. Anwen woke to the scent of moonflowers and the sound of distant music. She was lying on something impossibly soft. A bed, she realized, draped in fabrics that felt like woven starlight. The room around her was unfamiliar, its walls made of living crystal that pulsed with soft luminescence, its ceiling lost somewhere in the darkness above. The Eventide Palace. She had been brought to the heart of Lysander's kingdom. "You are awake." The voice came from the shadows beside her bed. Anwen turned her head, her body protesting the movement, and found Lysander sitting in a chair that seemed grown from twisted moonlight. His silver eyes were fixed on her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "How long?" she managed. "3 days." He leaned forward, and she saw the exhaustion etched into his features, the hollows beneath his eyes, the tension in his jaw. "Your power nearly killed you. If I had arrived moments later..." "Mavis." The name came out as a sob. "She tried to protect me, the wolf." "Her body has been recovered. She will be honored in the gardens of eternal rest, where all heroes of the court are laid to peace." Lysander's voice was gentle but steady. "She gave her life protecting the future queen of the Eventide court. Her sacrifice will never be forgotten." Future queen. Anwen struggled to sit up, her hand flying to her belly. The babies moved beneath her palm. Both of them. Strong kicks from opposite sides, and she sagged with relief. "They are well," Lysander said quietly. "Stronger than they should be, the healers say. Your power protected them during the attack." He paused. "That power, Anwen, do you understand what it was?" She shook her head, though fragments of memory were filtering back. The silver light, the wolves fleeing, the sensation of something ancient and vast surging through her veins. "The Night Whisper bloodline carries a gift," Lysander continued. "It manifests differently in each generation. Your mother's gift was prophecy. She foresaw her own death, which is why she fled Thornhaven before you were born. My grandmother's gift was healing. Mine is dominion over shadow and starlight." He reached out, his fingers hovering above the silver mark on her collarbone. "Yours," he said softly, "is radiance. The ability to channel pure light, to burn away darkness, to illuminate truth. It is the rarest manifestation in our history. Only 3 Night Whispers have ever possessed it. I don't know how to control it. You will learn." His hand dropped. "If you choose to stay." If you choose to stay. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. "The Wolf King," Anwen heard herself say. "He was there, at the cottage. I saw him before I lost consciousness." Lysander's expression hardened. "He arrived moments after I did. His wolves had been tracking the night fangs. He claimed he was trying to protect you. Do you believe him?" A long pause. "I believe that he believes it. Whether his actions constitute protection or possession is a different question. He was drugged." The words came out before Anwen could stop them. "At the claiming. Mavis told me. The Grimwoods poisoned him, made him choose Sariel, and made him..." "I know." Lysander's voice was carefully neutral. "My spies confirm the same intelligence." "Then it was not truly a rejection. He did not choose to betray me. He was violated, just as I was when he placed his claiming bite without my knowledge of my own heritage. This is true." Lysander studied her face with those ancient silver eyes. Does this change how you feel about him? The question struck like a blade. Did it? Anwen thought of Kagor. Not the puppet at the ceremony, but the man she had known before. The man who had found her weeping in a garden and sat beside her in silence until she was ready to speak. The man who had kissed her in moonlit clearings and sworn oaths of eternal devotion. She had loved that man. But she had also seen him reject her before 1,000 witnesses, kiss another woman while her heart shattered, and declare her pack property when she tried to flee. The poison excused some of it, perhaps most of it, but not all. I don't know what I feel, Anwen admitted. Everything I believed has been torn apart and rearranged into shapes I don't recognize. My heritage, my bonds, my own power. None of it is what I thought. Then you need time. Lysander rose from his chair, and she realized for the first time how tall he truly was. How beautiful. How ancient and powerful and gentle all at once. I will not press you for declarations, Anwen. I have waited 400 years for my fated mate. I can wait until you are ready to know your own heart. He moved toward the door, then paused. But there is something you should know. He did not turn to face her. The Wolf King has requested an audience. He has surrendered himself to my guards at the edge of my territory, alone and unarmed. He says he will not leave until he speaks with you. Anwen's heart clenched. He has also renounced his choice of Serial Grimwood, publicly, before his entire pack. He has declared her family traitors and sworn blood oath to destroy every Grimwood who had a hand in the plot against you. Why would he do that? Now Lysander did turn. His silver eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw something vulnerable in their depths. Because he loves you, the Fae King said quietly. Whatever else is true or false in this wretched situation, Kagor Ironclaw loves you with a ferocity that borders on madness. His wolf has been fighting for dominance since the moment he regained his senses. If he does not see you soon, feel the mate bond stabilize. He will go feral. Lysander nodded. An alpha who loses himself to the beast is a danger to everything around him. And an alpha as powerful as Kagor, with 3,000 warriors still loyal to him, would be a catastrophe. Yes. Silence stretched between them. What do you want me to do? Anwen asked. What I want is irrelevant. Lysander's voice was soft, but firm. What matters is what you choose. Will you see him? Every instinct screamed at Anwen to refuse, to stay in this bed, in this sanctuary, protected from the wolf who had shattered her heart. But another voice whispered beneath her fear. The voice of the woman who had placed her hand in Kagor's 8 months ago, knowing that a servant could never truly be with a king, choosing to love him anyway. The voice that remembered how he had trembled the first time he kissed her. I will see him, she said, but not alone. I want you there, Lysander. Whatever he has to say, I want a witness who will not let him twist the truth. Something shifted in the Fae King's expression, not triumph, something deeper, something like respect. As you wish. He inclined his head. I will have him brought to the Garden of Veils at sunset. The wards there will prevent any violence and ensure all words spoken are truth. He left before she could respond. Anwen lay back against the starlight pillows, her hands pressing against her swelling belly, her mind a hurricane of conflicting emotions. In a few hours, she would face the wolf who had claimed her and rejected her, and searched desperately for her across 3 realms. And she would have to decide whether any amount of love could repair what had been broken. The Garden of Veils was appropriately named. Silver curtains of woven mist hung between ancient trees, whose leaves whispered secrets in languages older than human memory. The ground beneath Anwen's feet was carpeted with flowers that glowed softly in the twilight, casting dancing shadows across the clearing where 2 thrones had been placed. Lysander sat in one, his posture deceptively relaxed, his silver eyes missing nothing. The other throne remained empty, waiting for a guest who had not yet arrived. Anwen stood between them, refusing the seat that had been offered to her. She needed to move, needed to pace, needed to do something with the nervous energy that crackled through her veins. The babies had been active all afternoon, kicking and rolling as if they sensed the significance of what was coming. "He approaches," Lysander said quietly. Anwen turned toward the garden entrance, and there he was. Kagor Ironclaw looked like a man who had walked through hell and emerged only partially intact. His dark hair was wild, his amber eyes burning with an intensity that bordered on fever. He had lost weight. The ceremonial furs that had once fit him perfectly now hung loose on his shoulders. But he was still beautiful, still powerful, still the man who had made her feel, for the first time in her life, like she belonged to someone. He stopped at the edge of the clearing, his gaze finding hers with desperate hunger. Anwen. Her name came out broken, cracked, as if he had been screaming it for months. "You're alive. You're safe. I thought, when I saw the silver light, when you collapsed, I thought." "You thought what?" Her voice was steadier than she expected. "That I had died? That you would never have the chance to explain why you kissed another woman before the entire pack while I watched from the shadows with your child growing inside me?" Kagor flinched as if she had struck him. "I don't remember the claiming." The words tumbled out in a rush. "I remember nothing from that night except waking 3 days later with Sariel in my chambers, her hands on my body, her voice telling me that I had chosen her and consummated our bond while the entire pack celebrated outside." "And did you?" Anwen's voice cracked. "Consummate? No." The word was fierce, absolute. The moment I understood what she was claiming, I threw her across the room. I shifted without control and nearly killed her before my guards pulled me back. "I have not touched her, Anwen. I have not touched anyone since the night I placed my mark on your skin and swore you were the only mate I would ever want." Through the bond between them, the wolf bond that still burned on her hip, Anwen felt the truth of his words. He was not lying. Whatever had happened that night, he had not willingly betrayed her in that way. But there was so much more to address. "You knew nothing of my heritage," she said. "You placed your claiming bite on a woman you believed to be a servant, a nobody, an orphan with no bloodline worth speaking of." "Yes. Would you have claimed me if you had known I was Fae?" The question hung in the air. Kagor's amber eyes never wavered. "I claimed you because I love you. Because from the moment I found you crying in that garden, something inside me recognized something inside you. I did not know you had Fae blood. I did not care. I still do not care. You could be human, wolf, Fae, or something this world has never seen, and I would still want you as my mate." "Pretty words." Lysander spoke for the first time, his musical voice carrying an edge of frost. "But words are easy, Wolf. Your actions speak differently. You kept her hidden. You promised her a throne you knew your council would never allow her to claim. You let her believe she would be queen, while planning a claiming ceremony designed to choose someone else." Kagor's jaw tightened. "I was buying time. The council? The council you control? The advisors who serve at your pleasure?" Lysander's silver eyes gleamed with cold fury. "Do not pretend you were powerless. Alpha King, you chose to keep her in shadows rather than fight for her in daylight. And when the Grimwoods made their move, you were so easily manipulated that 3 drops of poison in your wine erased 8 months of devotion. I was drugged. You were careless." Lysander rose from his throne, and the air around him crackled with power. "A true mate does not leave his beloved vulnerable to attack. A true mate does not accept wine from the servants of his political rivals on the eve of a ceremony that will determine his queen. A true mate protects what is his." "And you?" Kagor snarled, his wolf rising to the surface, his eyes flickering between amber and gold. "You who appeared from nowhere to claim a woman you had never met. who stole her from my hall with magic and mist while she was vulnerable and afraid. How is that protection? I saved her life. You took her from me. She chose to come with me. Lysander's voice dropped to something deadly quiet. Ask her yourself if she had to be forced. Ask her if she felt safer staying in your hall, surrounded by Grimwoods who wanted her dead, bound to a king who had just publicly rejected her. Kagor turned to Anwen, and she saw the agony in his eyes. Is that true? He asked. Did you choose to go with him? Did you want to leave me? Anwen's heart cracked in her chest. I didn't know what I wanted, she whispered. I had just watched you kiss another woman. I had just learned that the father of my children had forgotten I existed. I had just discovered I was apparently Fey royalty, marked by a king I had never met, carrying twins in a body that suddenly didn't feel like my own. Tears spilled down her cheeks. What I wanted was to be in our clearing, in the place where you held me and promised me forever. But you weren't there, Kagor. The man I loved wasn't there. There was only a stranger with empty eyes and Serial Grimwood's lips against his mouth. I'm here now. Kagor crossed the clearing in 3 strides, dropping to his knees before her. I'm here, Anwen. I have been searching for you every moment since I woke. I have torn apart my kingdom trying to find you. I have renounced Sariel, declared her family traitors, sworn blood oath to... I know. She stepped back from his reaching hands. Lysander told me. Then come home. His voice cracked. Come back to Thornhaven. I will announce you as my queen tomorrow. I will execute every Grimwood who conspired against us. I will give you everything I promised, everything you deserve. And the Fey mark? Anwen touched her collarbone, where the silver patterns glowed softly beneath her dress. What of the bond that formed without my consent or his? What of the mate claim that Lysander carries as truly as you carry yours? Kagor's expression twisted. He has no right to you. A Fey cannot claim a wolf-bonded female. She is Fey-blooded, Lysander interrupted calmly, which makes the wolf's claim the questionable one, not mine. She bears my mark. A mark placed before she knew her heritage, before she could give informed consent. Under the laws of the Eventide court, such claims are considered void. We are not in your damned court. We are in my garden, in my kingdom, under my wards. Lysander's voice dropped to a whisper. And if you raise your voice to me again, Wolf, I will show you exactly why my people have held dominion over magic, since before your ancestors learned to shift. The air between them crackled with power. Anwen stepped between them, her hands raised. Stop, both of you. Her voice carried harmonics she did not intend, power bleeding through despite her exhaustion. I am not a territory to be fought over. I am not a prize to be won by the loudest growl or the strongest magic. She turned to Kagor. I loved you. Part of me still does, and will never stop. But you failed me. Whether through manipulation or carelessness or simple circumstance, you failed to protect what we had. I cannot simply return to your arms and pretend that wound does not exist. Then to Lysander. And you. You have been kind, patient. Everything I could have asked for in an impossible situation. But I have known you for 2 months. You speak of a mate bond written in starlight, of waiting 400 years for my soul. Yet I do not know your favorite food, your deepest fear, the sound of your laughter when you are truly at ease. She stepped back from both of them, her hands moving to cradle her belly. I cannot choose between you. Not tonight. Not while assassins hunt me and kingdoms crumble and the children growing inside me carry both your bloodlines in their veins. Both? Kagor's voice was strangled. The Fey mark formed the night I arrived in the Eventide court, Anwen said quietly. It has been influencing the twins ever since. The healers say they are no longer simply wolf-blooded. They carry traces of Fey power now. Whatever children I birth will belong to both your worlds. Silence fell across the Garden of Veils. Lysander's expression had gone utterly still. Kagor looked as though she had driven a blade through his chest. And Anwen? Anwen simply felt tired. Tired of being claimed and fought over and hidden and hunted. Tired of being a pawn in political games she had never asked to join. "Here is what will happen," she said, and her voice carried the authority of someone who had finally found her footing. "I will remain in the Eventide court until my children are born. No claims will be finalized, no bonds will be completed. Both of you will have access to me, supervised, as we determine whether either of your loves is true or simply possessive." "Anwen," Kagor began. "In the meantime," she continued, cutting him off, "you will work together to eliminate the Grimwood threat. Lord Hadrian has sent assassins after me once. He will send them again. I will not raise my children in a world where the man who tried to murder them still draws breath." Lysander's lips curved in something that might have been approval. "A reasonable demand?" Kagor looked as though he wanted to argue, but something in Anwen's expression must have convinced him otherwise. His shoulders sagged in defeat. As you wish," he said hoarsely, "but know this, Anwen, I will prove myself to you. However long it takes, whatever it requires, I will earn back what I lost. I swear it on my wolf, my crown, and as every breath remaining in my body." He rose, turned, and walked out of the Garden of Veils with the rigid posture of a king whose world had crumbled around him. Lysander remained seated, watching Anwen with those ancient silver eyes. "You handled that well," he said softly. "I had no choice." Anwen's legs finally gave out, and she sank onto the empty throne. "If I had let either of you make this choice for me, I would have lost myself entirely." "And have you?" Lysander tilted his head. "Lost yourself?" Anwen thought of the silver light that had exploded from her in the cottage, the power she did not understand, the heritage she had never known, the children growing in her womb, who would be born into a war between worlds. "No," she said finally. "I think I'm just beginning to find myself." Lysander smiled, a real smile for the first time since she had met him. It transformed his face, made him look younger, almost boyish despite his 4 centuries. "Good," he said, "because the journey ahead will require every piece of yourself you can muster." A howl split the evening air, distant but approaching. Both of them turned toward the sound. "That came from the northern boundary," Lysander said, rising to his feet, all traces of softness vanishing. "My wards should have stopped any wolf from—" A Fey guard burst into the garden, her face pale with terror. "My king, the Night Fangs, a second pack, they have breached the outer wards. They are heading for the palace, and they are not alone." "Who accompanies them?" The guard swallowed hard. "Lord Hadrian Grimwood himself. And 300 wolves who still carry the Grimwood banner. They say they have come to claim the half-breed's head and the Alpha King's crown." Anwen's blood turned to ice. Lysander's hand closed around hers, pulling her to her feet. "We move," he said. "Now." But as they fled toward the palace, Anwen felt her wolf bond flare with sudden heat. Kagor's voice thundered through her mind, desperate and furious and terrifyingly close. "They are here. The Grimwoods are here. Run, Anwen, run, and do not look back. I will hold them as long as I can." And then, before she could scream for him to stop, she felt the bond shudder with impact. He had shifted. He was fighting. And she could not tell if he was winning or dying. The Eventide Palace was under siege. Anwen ran through corridors of living crystal, Lysander's hand gripping hers as explosions of dark magic shook the walls around them. Fey guards sprinted past in the opposite direction, their faces grim and their hands blazing with elemental fire. "The throne room," Lysander commanded. "The ancient wards there are strongest. Nothing can breach them without my blood or my permission." "What about the others?" Anwen gasped. The servants, the healers, they are evacuating to the underground sanctuaries. My people know what to do. His silver eyes met hers, fierce and unwavering. My only concern right now is you. Another explosion rocked the palace. Somewhere behind them, glass shattered and wolves howled in triumph. The throne room doors loomed before them, massive slabs of moonstone carved with runes that pulsed with ancient power. Lysander pressed his palm to the center, and the runes flared brilliant silver. The doors swung open. He pulled Anwen inside, and the moment they crossed the threshold, silence fell. Complete, absolute silence, as if the chaos outside existed in another world entirely. The wards are holding, Lysander breathed. For now. Anwen turned to face him, her heart pounding. Kagor. I felt him through the bond. He was fighting. I know. Lysander's expression was unreadable. He engaged the Grimwood forces at the northern boundary. His wolves joined mine in the defense. His wolves? But he came alone? He sent for them the moment he arrived in my territory. 300 of his most loyal warriors, hidden in the forests beyond my borders, waiting for his signal. Lysander's jaw tightened. He anticipated this attack, Anwen. He knew the Grimwoods would make their move. The realization struck her like a physical blow. He used himself as bait. He surrendered to your guards, knowing Hadrian would see it as an opportunity to strike while the Wolf King was vulnerable and away from his forces. Yes. Lysander released her hand and moved toward the center of the throne room, where a pool of still water reflected the starlit ceiling above. It was a gamble, a desperate one, but it may have saved us all. Anwen followed him to the pool's edge. In its depths, she could see images forming, the battle raging beyond the palace walls. Fey warriors fighting alongside wolves against a tide of darkness. And at the center of the chaos, a massive black wolf tearing through enemy lines with savage precision. Kagor. He was not dying. He was devastating. He fights well, Lysander said quietly. I have lived 4 centuries and seen countless battles. Few warriors move with such controlled fury. He's protecting me. Anwen's voice cracked. Even now. Even after everything. Yes. Lysander turned to face her, and she saw something raw in his silver eyes. He loves you, Anwen. I told you this before, and I tell you again now. Whatever else he has done or failed to do, his love for you is not in question. Then how do I choose? The words tore from her throat. How do I decide between a love that failed me and a love I barely know? Lysander was silent for a long moment. Perhaps, he said finally, the choice is not between us at all. Before Anwen could ask what he meant, the pool's surface rippled violently. A new image formed. Lord Hadrian Grimwood, standing at the edge of the battlefield, his silver hair whipping in winds of dark magic. Beside him knelt a row of figures in chains. Fey children, a dozen of them, the youngest no more than 5 years old, and their faces streaked with tears, their small bodies trembling with terror. Hadrian's voice echoed through the pool as if he stood in the throne room itself. Lysander Night Whisper, I know you watch. I know your precious half-breed cowers behind your wards. So hear me now. Surrender the girl, or I will slaughter these whelps one by one until their blood floods your pretty gardens. Anwen's hand flew to her mouth. He would not dare, Lysander breathed, but his voice held a tremor she had never heard before. He has nothing left to lose. Anwen's mind raced. You said it yourself. His family is ruined, his daughter rejected, his plot exposed. He knows he will die whether he wins or loses tonight. This is revenge, pure and simple. In the pool, Hadrian drew a blade that gleamed with poisoned silver. You have 1 hour, Fey King. 1 hour before I start with the smallest. The image dissolved. Lysander's composure shattered. He slammed his fist against the pool's edge and cracks spiderwebbed through the ancient stone. I cannot open the wards. The moment I do, his wolves will flood the palace. Everyone inside will die. Then I go to him. Anwen's voice was steady despite the terror clawing at her chest. I am what he wants. I give myself up, and the children live. No. Lysander seized her shoulders. I did not search 400 years for my mate only to watch her walk into the jaws of a monster. And I will not let children die for me. Anwen pulled free of his grip. What kind of queen would I be, Lysander? What kind of mother? If I hide behind these walls while innocents are slaughtered, I am no better than the Grimwoods themselves. There must be another way. There is. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Anwen spun, her hands rising instinctively, silver light crackling at her fingertips. A figure stepped from the shadows at the edge of the throne room. Not a fae. Not a wolf. A woman with hair like spun midnight and eyes that swirled with colors that had no names. She wore robes of woven starlight, and when she moved, reality seemed to ripple around her. Who are you? Lysander demanded, placing himself between the stranger and Anwen. I am the one who has watched this story unfold since before any of you drew breath. The woman smiled, and it was the smile of something ancient and terrible and kind all at once. I am the oracle of the between, and I have come to offer the half-blood child a choice. Anwen stepped around Lysander despite his protests. What choice? The oracle's swirling eyes fixed on her with unsettling intensity. You carry 2 souls in your womb, child. 2 children who should not exist. Wolf and fae blood mingled in a way that has not occurred in 10,000 years. Do you know what such children represent? No. Balance. The word echoed through the throne room. The end of the ancient war between wolf-kind and fae-kind, the beginning of a new era where both peoples might finally know peace. The oracle moved closer. But only if those children survive to be born, only if their mother survives to raise them. Then tell me how to save the fae children without dying. I can do better than tell you. The oracle raised her hand, and a sphere of swirling light formed in her palm. I can give you the power to save them yourself, but the cost will be significant. What cost? The wolf bond. Anwen's heart stopped. The claiming bite Kagor placed on your flesh was incomplete, a bond of desire rather than destiny. But it has grown roots in your soul nonetheless. If you accept my gift, those roots will be severed. The wolf bond will die, and with it, any possibility of a future with the Alpha King. Silence fell across the throne room. And if I refuse? Anwen whispered. Then you will remain as you are. Powerful enough to illuminate a room but not an army. Strong enough to protect yourself but not a dozen children chained at the edge of a battlefield. The oracle's expression held no judgment. The choice, as always, is yours. Lysander stepped forward. This is manipulation. You cannot ask her to. I ask nothing. The oracle's voice sharpened. I offer. What she does with that offer is her own affair. Anwen looked at the sphere of light, at Lysander's anguished face, at the pool where, somewhere beyond these walls, children waited to die. She thought of Kagor, of moonlit clearings and whispered promises, of the man who had held her as if she were precious beyond measure. And she thought of the man who had kissed another woman while she watched, who had failed to protect what they had, who had, even with the best intentions, let her be hunted and nearly killed. The oracle was right. Their bond was desire, not destiny, and desire, however powerful, was not enough to outweigh the lives of innocent children. I accept, Anwen said. No, Lysander grabbed her arm. Anwen, think about what you're... I have thought. She met his silver eyes with a calm she did not feel. I have spent 2 months thinking about who I was, who I am, who I want to become, and the woman I want to be does not let children die for her sake. She turned back to the oracle and extended her hand. Give me what I need to save them. The sphere of light descended into her palm. Pain exploded through her body. Anwen screamed as the power tore through her, reshaping her from the inside out. She felt the wolf bond on her hip flare with agonizing heat, and then, with a sensation like tearing flesh, it began to dissolve. The mark faded, the connection severed. The thread that had bound her to Kagor for nearly a year snapped like a cut string. And in its place, something new flooded through her veins. Light. Pure, blazing, infinite light. The power of her Fey heritage, fully awakened at last. When Anwen opened her eyes, she was glowing. Not just her hands or her mark. Her entire body radiated silver luminescence, bright enough to illuminate every corner of the vast throne room. She could feel the power thrumming through her blood, vast and ancient and hungry for release. The half-blood has become the radiant, the oracle said softly. The first in 3,000 years. She began to fade, her form dissolving into mist. Use the gift wisely, child. Save the innocents, end the war. And when the time comes to complete your true bond, do not hesitate. She vanished. Lysander stared at Anwen with something between awe and terror. Your eyes, he breathed. They're silver now. Like mine. Anwen caught her reflection in the pool's surface and gasped. He was right. Her eyes, which had been a common brown all her life, now swirled with liquid silver that glowed with inner fire. She looked like a fae. She looked like a queen. The children, she said, and her voice carried harmonics of power. How do I reach them? Lysander hesitated only a moment. Then he straightened, and his expression hardened into something regal and resolved. Together, he said. We go together. He took her hand, and their combined power made the throne room blaze like a captured star. Open the wards, Anwen commanded. Lysander spoke a word in a language older than human memory. The doors of the throne room exploded outward. And together, the Fey King and the Radiant Queen walked into the heart of the battle. The battlefield fell silent as Anwen emerged from the palace. Every eye, wolf, Fey, and Grimwood alike, turned toward the woman who blazed like a second moon. She walked without hurrying, Lysander at her side, her bare feet leaving prints of silver light on the blood-soaked ground. Lord Hadrian Grimwood stood at the center of the carnage, his blade still pressed to the throat of the smallest Fey child. His eyes widened as he took in the transformation. What trickery is this? He snarled. No trickery. Anwen's voice carried across the battlefield, amplified by power she was only beginning to understand. Only truth. The truth of what I am. The truth of what I can do. She raised her hand, and light gathered at her palm. Release the children, Lord Grimwood. This is your only warning. Hadrian laughed, but the sound was brittle with fear. You think a light show frightens me? I have 300 wolves at my command. I have the Night Fangs, the deadliest assassins ever bred. What can one glowing half-breed do against such? Anwen released the light. It was not an attack. Not truly. It was simply illumination. Radiance so pure and absolute that it burned away every shadow on the battlefield, exposing every hidden wolf, every crouching assassin, every blade waiting in darkness. And the Night Fangs, creatures born of shadow and secrecy, screamed. They could not exist in perfect light. Their forms began to dissolve, their bodies collapsing into wisps of darkness that evaporated like morning mist. In seconds, the most feared assassins in the wolf realm had simply ceased to exist. The Grimwood wolves howled in terror. That is what one glowing half-breed can do, Anwen said quietly. Now release the children, or I will show you what happens when the Radiant stops being merciful. Hadrian's hand trembled on his blade. For one terrible moment, Anwen thought he might kill the child anyway. a final act of spite before his inevitable defeat. Then a black shape slammed into him from the side. Kagor. The Alpha King's wolf form was massive, terrifying, and covered in the blood of enemies. His jaws closed around Hadrian's sword arm, and the snap of breaking bone echoed across the silent battlefield. Hadrian screamed as the blade fell from his nerveless fingers. Kagor shook him once, twice, then flung him to the ground with casual brutality. The Grimwood Lord lay in the mud, clutching his shattered arm, his face white with agony. "The children," Anwen said to Lysander. "Free them." The Fey King moved immediately, his magic dissolving the chains that bound the young ones. Fey guards rushed forward to gather the terrified children, carrying them toward the safety of the palace. Anwen walked toward where Kagor stood over Hadrian's broken form. The Alpha King shifted as she approached, his human body emerging from the wolf's shape. He was wounded, claw marks across his chest, blood matting his dark hair. But his amber eyes were clear and fixed on her face. Then he saw her eyes, the silver that had replaced the brown. Anwen. Her name came out strangled. "What happened? What did you—" "What I had to." She stopped a few feet from him, close enough to see the devastation dawning on his face. "To save the children. To end this. The bond." His hand moved to his own chest, pressing against the place where he had once felt their connection. "I can't feel you anymore. The thread is gone." "Yes. You severed it." His voice cracked. "You chose to sever it. I chose to save innocent lives." Anwen met his amber eyes without flinching. "The bond between us was built on secrets and shadows, Kagor. On promises you couldn't keep and choices you didn't make. It was never going to survive what we've been through. I would have found another way. There was no other way." She gestured toward the children being carried to safety. "A dozen Fey lives for one incomplete bond. That was the trade, and I would make it again." Kagor looked as if she had driven her hand through his chest and torn out his still-beating heart. "So this is it," he said hoarsely. "After everything. After all the searching, all the fighting, all the—" His voice broke. "You're choosing him. I'm choosing myself." Anwen stepped closer, close enough to touch, though she kept her hands at her sides. "For the first time in my life, I am choosing what I want, not what someone else has claimed or demanded or manipulated me into." "And what do you want?" The question hung between them, heavy with all the weight of their shared history. "I want peace," Anwen said softly. "Between your people and his. Between the wolves who raised me and the Fae who share my blood. I want my children to grow up in a world where they are not torn between two kingdoms that have been at war for millennia." She reached out and touched his face, one final gesture of tenderness. "And I want you to find a mate who can give you what I never could. Someone who belongs wholly to your world, without the complications of divided heritage and competing claims." Kagor caught her hand, pressing it against his cheek. "There will never be another mate for me," he said. "You were it, Anwen. You will always be it." "Then I am sorry." She pulled her hand back gently. "Truly, deeply sorry, because you deserved better than what fate dealt us." She turned away before she could see his expression shatter. Lysander was waiting at the edge of the battlefield, his silver eyes reflecting her own transformed ones. He said nothing as she approached, merely extended his hand in silent offer. Anwen took it. The moment their fingers intertwined, the silver mark on her collarbone blazed with warmth. Not the burning agony of the wolf bond, something gentler, deeper, a recognition that resonated in her very soul. "The battle is won," Lysander said quietly. "The Grimwood forces are surrendering. Hadrian will face justice before both our peoples. And Serial? Captured trying to flee the eastern territories. She will share her father's fate." Anwen nodded, exhaustion finally beginning to creep through the fading adrenaline. "Then it's over." The war is over. Lysander's thumb traced circles on her palm. What comes next is up to you. Behind them, she heard Kagor's wolves gathering around their king, heard the murmur of voices, the rustle of movement as the combined forces began the grim work of tending to the wounded and collecting the dead. And somewhere deep in her belly, both babies kicked at once. I need to rest, Anwen said. The children, my children, they're restless. Then come. Lysander guided her toward the palace. The healers will attend you. And when you wake, we can speak of the future. They had taken perhaps 10 steps when Anwen felt it. A ripple of wrongness. A spike of killing intent. She spun just in time to see Hadrian Grimwood lunge from the ground where he had lain broken. His shattered arm hung useless at his side, but his remaining hand clutched a small blade, a throwing knife hidden in his boot, coated with something that gleamed sickly green in the moonlight. Poison. He hurled it not at Anwen, but at her belly. Time slowed to a crawl. Anwen saw the blade spinning toward her children, saw the poison glistening on its edge, saw her own hands rising too slowly to stop it. And then, Lysander was there. The Fey King threw himself between her and the knife, taking the poisoned blade in his shoulder instead of letting it find her womb. He crumpled against her, his weight driving them both to the ground. Lysander! Anwen's scream split the night. She caught him as he fell, her hands pressing against the wound that was already spreading dark veins across his chest. The poison was Feybane, the deadliest toxin known to her people, and it was racing toward his heart. No, no, no. Anwen's power flared instinctively, silver light pouring from her hands into his wound. But Feybane was not a shadow to be burned away. It was a poison, and no amount of radiance could stop its spread. Anwen. Lysander's voice was weak but calm. Listen to me. Don't talk. Save your strength. There has to be a healer, an antidote. There is no antidote for Feybane. His hand found hers, his grip already faltering. But there is another way. Tell me. Complete the bond. She stared at him, not understanding. A fully bonded pair shares life force, he explained, each word costing him visible effort. If you claim me as I have claimed you, if you bind your soul to mine completely, my body can draw on your strength to fight the poison. Then I'll do it. Tell me how. You must bite me. His silver eyes found hers, holding them with fierce intensity. Over the heart. You must choose me with full knowledge and full consent, not as a desperate act, but as a true claiming. The bond will know the difference. Anwen looked at the dark veins spreading across his chest, at the man who had waited 4 centuries for her, who had given her sanctuary when she had nowhere else to go, who had just thrown himself in front of a poisoned blade meant for her children. The choice was not difficult at all. I choose you, she said, not because I have to, because I want to. She lowered her mouth to his chest, directly over his faltering heart, and she bit. The bond exploded between them. It was nothing like the wolf bond had been. No burning, no pain, no sense of being claimed by something outside herself. This was completion. 2 halves of a single soul finally becoming whole. Anwen felt Lysander's life force surge into her awareness, felt the poison attacking his heart, the cellular destruction spreading through his veins, and felt her own power responding, pouring through the bond like liquid starlight, burning the Feybane from his system 1 molecule at a time. She saw his memories flood through her mind, 400 years of searching, countless nights standing at the edge of the mortal realm, feeling the faint pull of a bond that led to someone not yet born. The moment he had walked into the howling hall and seen her for the first time, the overwhelming recognition, the joy, the terror that she might not choose him. And she felt him seeing hers, the loneliness of growing up an orphan, the desperate love she had given Kagor, and the devastation of his rejection. The fear and wonder of discovering who she truly was, And the moment, just now, when she had looked at him dying on the ground and realized that losing him would destroy something fundamental in her soul. The bond settled into place like a key turning in a lock. When Anwen finally raised her head, Lysander was breathing steadily. The dark veins had faded. The wound on his shoulder had closed to a silver scar, and his eyes, when they met hers, held a love so vast it took her breath away. "My queen," he whispered. "My king," she answered. Behind them, someone was still screaming. Anwen turned to see Kagor's wolves dragging Lord Hadrian Grimwood away from the spot where he had thrown the knife. The old lord was laughing now, a broken sound of madness and defeat. "It doesn't matter," he shrieked. "The half-breed's children will never unite your peoples. The wolves will never accept a fey-blooded queen. This war will never—" His words cut off as Kagor stepped into his path. The Alpha King's face was carved from ice and fury. He looked at the man who had drugged him, who had nearly stolen his mate, who had just tried to murder the woman he still loved, and her unborn children. "Lord Hadrian Grimwood," Kagor said, his voice carrying across the silent battlefield. "For crimes against the crown of Thornhaven, for conspiracy to commit murder, for high treason, and for the attempted assassination of innocents, I sentence you to death." His hand shot out, claws extending. One strike. Lord Hadrian Grimwood crumpled to the ground, his throat torn open, his mad laughter finally silenced. Kagor turned to face Anwen and Lysander, his claws dripping with blood. "Justice is served," he said. "The Grimwood threat is ended." He held her gaze for one long moment, a moment filled with grief and loss, and something that might have been acceptance. Then he turned and walked away, his wolves falling into formation behind him. Anwen watched him go until the darkness swallowed him entirely. "He will be all right," Lysander said softly, rising to his feet and helping her up. "In time." "How do you know?" "Because he is strong, because his people need him, and because—" Lysander paused, choosing his words carefully. "Because loving someone enough to let them go is its own kind of nobility. He will carry the grief, but it will not destroy him." Anwen pressed her hand to her belly, where her children had finally gone still. "Take me home," she said. "I want to rest before whatever comes next." Lysander wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close against his side. "Home," he agreed. Together. They walked toward the eventide palace as dawn began to break over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. The war was over. The future had begun. 3 months later, the eventide court had never seen such a celebration. Anwen stood at the window of the royal chambers, watching the festivities unfold in the gardens below. Fae and wolves mingled freely, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. For the first time in living memory, the two peoples had come together not for war or negotiation, but for joy. The naming ceremony of the twin heirs. "You should be resting." Lysander's arms wrapped around her from behind, his chin coming to rest on her shoulder. Through their bond, she felt his contentment. A warm, steady presence that had become as essential to her as breathing. "I have been resting for 3 months," Anwen replied, leaning back against his chest. "I think I am allowed to watch my own children's celebration." "Our children," he corrected softly. She smiled. "Our children." It had not been a simple journey to reach this moment. The birth had been difficult, lasting 3 days as her body struggled to bring forth children who carried both wolf and fey blood. There had been moments when the healers had feared she would not survive. Moments when Lysander had held her hand with such desperate intensity that his power had bled through their bond, sustaining her when her own strength failed. But she had survived. And so had they. A boy and a girl. The boy had his mother's silver eyes, a fey trait awakened through the bond, and dark hair like Kagor's, though threaded with strands of starlight from the magic that had shaped him in the womb. The girl had amber eyes that sometimes flickered gold, a remnant of the wolf blood that still ran in her veins. Lysander had named the boy Cassian, meaning light-bringer. Anwen had named the girl Aurora, meaning dawn. Perfect names for children who represented the dawn of a new era. A knock at the chamber door interrupted her thoughts. "Enter," Lysander called. A Fey guard stepped through, his expression carefully neutral. "Your Majesties, the Alpha King of Thornhaven requests an audience." Anwen's heart clenched. She had not seen Kagor since the night of the battle, had not spoken to him, had not felt him through a bond that no longer existed. She had heard reports, of course, that he had returned to his kingdom, had executed the remaining Grimwoods, had begun the slow work of rebuilding what their treachery had destroyed. But hearing about him and seeing him were very different things. "Send him in," she said, before Lysander could refuse. Her husband's concern flowed through their bond, but he said nothing. This was her choice to make. Kagor entered the chamber slowly, as if approaching a wounded animal. He looked better than the last time she had seen him. The circles under his eyes had faded, and his shoulders no longer carried the crushing weight of desperation. But when his amber eyes met hers, she saw the shadow of grief that would never fully heal. "Your Majesties." He inclined his head to both of them, proper and formal. "Thank you for receiving me." "You came a long way," Anwen said. "The Eventide Court is not an easy journey for a wolf. Some journeys are worth making, regardless of difficulty." His gaze dropped to her hands, which were empty. "I had hoped to see the children." "They are with their nurses, preparing for the ceremony." Anwen hesitated, then added, "You may see them, if you wish. After." Something flickered in Kagor's expression. Gratitude, perhaps, or pain. "I did not come only to see them," he said. "I came to offer something. A gift for the heirs of the Eventide Court from the Alpha King of Thornhaven." He reached into his coat and withdrew a scroll sealed with the Ironclaw crest. Lysander took it, breaking the seal and scanning the contents. His silver eyes widened. "This is a treaty," he said slowly, "a permanent alliance between our peoples. Trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, free passage through both territories." "And a provision," Kagor interrupted quietly, "recognizing any children born of both bloodlines as legitimate heirs to both thrones. Not just your children, but any who come after. Any wolves and fae who choose to bond despite the old laws forbidding it." Anwen stared at him. "You're ending the war," she breathed. "Truly ending it. Someone wise once told me that she wanted her children to grow up in a world where they were not torn between two kingdoms." Kagor's smile was sad but genuine. "I cannot give you what I once promised, Anwen, but I can give you this. A world where your children, our children, will never have to choose between their heritages." Our children. He had said it deliberately, she realized. An acknowledgement that Cassian and Aurora carried his blood too, even if they would never call him father. "This is generous," Lysander said, and Anwen felt his genuine surprise through their bond. "More than generous. It will change everything." "That is the point." Kagor rolled his shoulders, a gesture Anwen remembered from countless moonlit conversations. "I have been a poor king these past years, too focused on political games and personal desires to see what truly mattered. It is time I became the leader my people deserve." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "One more thing." He looked back at Anwen, and for one moment his mask slipped. She saw the man who had held her in forest clearings, the man who had loved her with everything he had, even when everything was not enough. "Be happy," he said softly. "That's all I ask. Be happy, and let me see you happy, even from a distance. That will be enough." He walked out before she could respond. Lysander's arms tightened around her as the door closed. "Are you all right?" he asked. Anwen thought about the question, about the tangled history she shared with Kagor, about the love that had been real, even if it had not been destined, about the grief of endings and the hope of new beginnings. "Yes," she said finally, "I think I am." The naming ceremony began at moonrise. Anwen stood on the balcony of the Eventide Palace, Lysander at her side, their children cradled in their arms. Below them, thousands of fae and wolves looked up with wonder and hope. "People of the Eventide Court," Lysander announced, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "People of Thornhaven. Today we present to you the heirs of a new era. Children of two bloodlines, born of a bond that defied ancient laws and bitter history." He lifted Cassian higher, and the baby cooed, silver light sparkling at his fingertips. Cassian Nightwhisper, crown prince of the Eventide Court, light bringer, bridge between worlds. Anwen stepped forward with Aurora, whose amber eyes surveyed the crowd with surprising alertness for an infant. Aurora Nightwhisper, crown princess of the Eventide Court, dawn of peace, daughter of wolves and fae alike. A howl rose from the wolves in the crowd, not a sound of challenge, but of acknowledgement, of acceptance. The fae answered with a cascade of silver light, filling the night sky with swirling patterns of luminescence. And somewhere in the crowd, Anwen saw Kagor, standing apart from his wolves, watching the ceremony with an expression that held both sorrow and hope. He had given her his blessing, his treaty, his acceptance. It was more than she had ever expected, more than she had dared to hope. She raised her hand in acknowledgement, a gesture that could have been a wave to the crowd but was really meant for him. He inclined his head in response. Then he turned and melted into the darkness, leaving her to her new life. Anwen looked at Lysander, at their children, at the celebrating crowd below. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. From servant girl to hunted fugitive to radiant queen. She thought about the love she had lost and the love she had found. She thought about the future stretching before her, bright with possibility. "What are you thinking?" Lysander asked softly. Anwen smiled and leaned into her husband's embrace. "I'm thinking that I never believed I would have this," she said. "A family, a purpose, a place where I truly belong." Lysander pressed a kiss to her temple. "You have always belonged my heart. The universe just took some time to arrange the proper introductions." She laughed, and the sound carried across the gardens, bright and free. Below them, wolves and fae danced together for the first time in 10,000 years. Above them, the stars blazed with ancient approval. And in her arms, Aurora reached out one tiny hand and caught a beam of moonlight, giggling as it sparkled between her fingers. The war was over. The future had begun. And Anwen, who had once been nothing and nobody, was finally, completely, and home. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story.